This video contains spoilers all the way to Luna 4. I'll be honest with you all, I never planned on making this video. I really did not. But the thing is, the logic is just so out there that I have to separate this video with my Archon Quest analysis video. Deadass, this theory is so long in the intended video that I didn't realize it's already 7 pages long while I'm writing. On one theory, this video is already over 20 minutes long, and I know a lot of you want to hear about the Torre and everything else as well, so my best decision right now is to, of course, separate it. So after the Archon Quest finished, my thought is, how the is the logic make sense? Now, I promise I will make a video on the Archon Quest itself, but right now, I need to analyze, theorize, and most importantly, vent all of my questions to you guys. As always, don't forget to give this video a like and comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is Neko Gitsune and I make lore and commentary videos on this channel to keep you company. Luna 4 is finally here, with Columbina finally entering the playable roster. She is a strong hydro character that enhances lunar reaction teams, and she herself enables all lunar reactions. She is a great asset to your account, and if you need extra promo gems for her, then allow me to introduce you to Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a reliable site for a fast, secure, and super reliable top-up experience for a Genesis Crystal. Additionally, they provide 25% discounts compared to normal prices in-game and supports consoles as well. Loot Bar provides a special discount each update and also a guaranteed bundle, and currently, Loot Bar is holding a lucky spin event called the Moon of 4 where you can score discount coupons, Welkin, and even a guaranteed Columbina bundle worth 180 pulls. Just log in and share daily for free spins, and your first spin is a guaranteed win, so be sure to check it out. Once you start your top up, they will only ask for your UID, nothing else, so your privacy is guaranteed and your items will arrive to your accounts in less than 2 minutes. If you like Miliastra Wonderland, you can also top up Kernel Nexus in Loot Bar the same way as you do it with Genesis Crystals. Over 30,000 Trustpilot reviews are showing their satisfaction after using Loot Bar, and if you have any problem with your transaction, their customer service is always available if you need assistance. Other than Genshin Impact, Loot Bar is also available for other games as well, such as Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, Sailor Zone Zero, etc. Click the link in the description below and register to get an additional 10% coupon that can be combined with all of the discounts, and don't miss out on Loot Bar's The Moon of 4 event. Now let's continue with the content. Before we enter the actual theory, let me answer the million-dollar question. How did Columbina return to the present if she traveled back to the past and was trapped inside Nibelung's prison, where, in this case, imprisoned the Moon Goddess's authority and soul? The answer to that, I admit, is a bit complicated, but here's how it goes. In the Archon Quest, Columbina's state when her body, soul, and authority are reunited, this is where Columbina can escape the prison. You might not remember this, but the Frost Moon is not yet destroyed, and Columbina herself is associated with that moon for a few reasons. Canon's prophecy from Luna 1, the Frost Moon's lingering power from Luna 3, the Three Moon Goddess's lingering wish also in Luna 3, and she is reborn in that moon when we fought the Torre at Luna 4, which is what we are experiencing. The Luon Notar is a very small fragment of her soul, the Moonlight, or Kuvaki in this case, is her body, and the authority, or the Tri-Lune authority that she obtained from the Three Moon Goddesses, were hidden in the Frost Moon. This is proven to be the case with Skirk as well, as she did sense the will of the Frost Moon has not yet died, but she had no idea what it meant either. Now I'll talk about the authority in a bit. So, Luonotar is the soul that will become an anchor to pull Columbina back into the present. Moonlight, or Kuvaki, is her body that awaits for her soul to reunite with her body, while the Trilune authority is her authority that she hid in the Frost Moon. Sandrone's formula in this case plays a part on how to find Columbina and defeat the Torre, hence why she asked the gang to finish the rest of the 10% by pulling the Frost Moon into Tevat. When her body, soul, and authority are reunited, Columbina is finally reborn. This also fulfills the Frost Moon Science's prophecy not once, but twice, and fits Not Christ's theme song perfectly, that a new moon goddess will be reborn from the dead Frost Moon. If I can give a rough timeline, this is how it should go. First, 7,000 plus years ago, the moon goddesses were created by Nibilang. Second, 6,000 plus years ago, as stated by Obate of Morning Star and Moon, the heavenly principles invaded, Nibilang returned, and the moon goddesses got imprisoned. Third, 500 years ago from current timeline, Columbina is born during the Cataclysm, fulfilling Canon's prophecy. Fourth, 500 years later, Columbina returns to the past via Moon Gate and is trapped inside Nibilang's prison. Fifth, 6,000 years into the past, Columbina met the goddesses and they knew she was their sister. Sixth, Columbina told them about the future and her plan to return to the future. Seventh, the moon goddesses gave their authority to Columbina and returned to the real world during the funerary year, witnessing what happened to their moons. 8. Arya died, Sonnet fused with the Abyss, while Canon survived for some time to serve the Frostmoon Scions and eventually perished, leaving them a prophecy that Columbina will be born in her stead. During this time, the moon goddesses died, but their wish to protect Teyvat still lingered. Their only link right now is the Frostmoon's power that was severed by the false sky. Number 9. Back to Point 3. Finally, after Point 328's loop, Columbina's authority, soul, and body reunite and rebirth during our confrontation with the Torre. The Frost Moon is now inside Teyvat's false sky, thus sustaining Columbina's power without worrying of its being cut off or severed. Of course, before we get to the crackpot theory, let me acknowledge one of your comments in my recent community post. So to put it simply, the Frost Moon eventually manifests a new moon goddess, just like what we know originally. How Columbina was even born is not because it's caused by, but rather influenced by her original goal to defeat the Torre. As to why it's 500 years ago, there doesn't seem to be a specific reason right now, but for how this is explained, I acknowledge that this makes the most sense right now. It happens naturally, and her birth from 500 years ago is Columbina's determination to save everyone in the future. It's just that she doesn't really remember it yet. Canon likely manifests her power so Columbina can be born during the Cataclysm so the plan can continue to work, which in this case, I admit, is the most logical answer. That said, we'll be entering the actual theory section, so bear with me and take everything I said with a very huge grain of salt. You might remember a theory I made some time ago in one of my Not Cry Exordia about the moon goddesses. In it, I state that Aurora's singing is the POV of the Frostmoon herself. The way this Archon quest played out seems to confirm that to be the case because if you remember, Columbina eventually returns the moon goddesses to the real world. Since the time in Nibilang's prison runs in reverse, this means that the moon goddesses are stuck in the same time over and over again, and the moment they return to the real world as a mortal vessel, they likely return to the time during the funerary year. Remember, after Sonnet died, she eventually fell into the abyss and became the Crimson Moon. This means that when they exit the prison, they don't immediately die, but rather have a normal lifespan or at least have enough time to do whatever they want to do. Since the prison was made in order for the moon goddesses to not interfere with Niblang's war with the heavenly principles, it's safe to assume that they were transported back to reality and witnessed their own moon's destruction. Arya's return and death created flood as stated in the web event. Sonnet, afraid of dying, turned to the abyss to prolong her lifespan, and Canon likely survived for some time because her moon is still intact, albeit severed by the false sky. Now this comes with Canon's role to tell the prophecy. According to the Silken Moon Serenade artifact set, Canon managed to guide the surviving Hyperboreans. Thus, they call themselves the Frostmoon Scions. In it, it is said that the antlers of the Frostmoon Scions were granted by Canon personally using the branches of the Irminsul, and it is supported in Columbina's 4th character story that Canon was disappointed when the bloodline gradually diluted. Now this clashes with the lore a bit because Canon seems to already know that the horns were within the Frostmoon Scions, as if she planted it from the start. However, the way I see it is that she probably was confused why only few people have horns within the group. When she eventually returns to the real world, that's when she finally remembered the horns that Columbina talked about and gifted them such using the branches of the Irminsul tree. Since the Irminsul is Teyvat's database, it explains why a lot of the Moonchanters have the ability to see the future. Ayla talked to the Traveler from the past, while Llama was able to show the Traveler bits of the past that are way beyond her lifespan. span. In any case, it is clear that unlike her sisters, Canon can still wander around Teyvat because her moon was still intact. Her death is likely the same as Columbina's, where she gradually disappeared. It is also said that she longs for her dead sisters when she served the Frost Moon Scions, and her tears eventually created the lilies that we saw today in Hisi Island, which explains why it resonated with Columbina's power. With the time she has before her dying days, she created a prophecy to the survivors of the Hyperboreans that a new moon goddess will be reborn in her stead, referring to, of course, Columbina. Now that answers some questions I had, and actually made this video I made some time ago aged really well. Except for the dual personality thing, which yeah, that one is not exactly correct. I highly recommend reading Columbina's character story 4, by the way, because it's actually quite entertaining. But even then, this creates an even bigger question in mind. Why 500 years ago, and how she was even born? Here's the thing, she can only be reborn when her soul, Luonotak, her body, in this case the Kuvaki, and her authority, the Triluna, reunite, which in this case is when she finally fulfilled Canon's prophecy. But she was born 500 years ago anyway, which even then this is impossible because her authority was not yet returned and her soul, in this case Luonotak, was created 500 years later. Now given, her rebirth is not the same case as what Canon prophesied, because the prophecy says a new moon goddess will be born in her stead, not Columbina finally reborn. But even then, Canon knew about Columbina's plans because she was there listening to what she had to say. Canon also did not know about the Frost Moon Scions as implied in the Archon quest, but she gradually learned about them as Columbina told her about it in her 4th character story. Not only that, all of this can't happen in the first place because the way Columbina was born is in reverse, meaning she was born from the future and not from the past. It's even weirder when you think about it because Columbina was born in the middle, then 500 years later returned to around 6,000 years ago, then returned back to the present, reborn at the Frost Moon with her authority intact. That is a wild timeline, don't you think? I read everything from the world quests and even her character story, but none of them answered my questions at all. It's so bizarre. The closest that we can guess, at least from what Wiki says, is that Columbina was born when primordial water was coalesced with Kuvaki, likely referencing this line from Columbina's 1st character story. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I never heard that the water in the sanctum of the Oathbearer is the primordial water. It made sense, but even then, how did it even get there? Regardless, this case is very unique because Sandra then mentioned that primordial water can complete her formula, which if you remember, the formula was made to figure out how to bring Columbina back and how to stop the Torre. The reason we didn't use the water in that quest was because half of the Notcry cast were cursed by the Torre that made them unable to leave the land, and Sandra's formula is vastly different from Renee's. So at the end, either her birth was intended, the Cataclysm has a connection towards it, or a third party accelerated Columbina's birth. The key here is 500 years ago, where the world was put into chaos by the Khaenri'ans, and it is so bad that even the Heavenly Principles had to personally stop it themselves. Believe it or not, Columbina's birth is strange because it created an endless time loop and paradox, or in common terms is called the bootstrap paradox. Columbina's birth just happens. Canon's prophecy was intended, but Canon created the prophecy already knowing Columbina's plan from the start. The other sisters wish for Columbina's birth, but they also know Columbina's plan to return. So, let's explore the closest possibility that we can think of. So we learned that the Cataclysm was the closest that we remember to almost destroy Teyvat. This created a lot of devastation. For example, 4 out of the 7 Archons died, abyssal monsters ravaged Teyvat, the Bakunawa corrupted Teyvat's time, etc, etc. From this, we can at least learn that the false sky might have also weakened, because the Abyss, just like the Traveler, are also alien to Teyvat. They don't belong in that world, and their existence in nature is destructive. Canons say that the Heavenly Principles are paranoid towards anyone trying to seek out powers or test the limits of their rules, and as a result, they cast celestial nails to those who dare to do so. So, it's good to assume that the Heavenly Principles were indeed running away from something, which in this case is probably the Abyss, since the False Sky was made in order to hide Teyvat from the rest of the universe anyway. Now I'll talk about the False Sky in my next video, but for this theory, the False Sky is likely related to Columbina's birth. It's possible that during the Cataclysm, the False Sky was weakened somehow because the Abyss invaded. Of course, I am aware that the Abyss invaded because of our twin's power, but all the same, the False Sky should logically be weakened in this state as well. It's so bad that Alice was assigned as the sustainer of the world's borders by who knows who, which in this case I assume it's a shade. Since it's weakened, we can assume that some of Columbina's authority leaked from Frostmoon and ended up creating her in the sanctum of the Oathbearer as per the polka beneath the moon's Oracle World quest. Very Earthlindis also opened the Moon Gate during that era, so it's good to assume that some of her soul also leaked to Teyvat. This ended up giving birth to the premature Columbina, where only her body reunited with half of her authority and soul. This could explain why she was born without the memory of her song, because if you remember, Columbina sang that song when she dissolved her body into moonlight in the Archon quest. But even then, this still doesn't explain why she was even born prematurely. If she was born in the future, thus creating a time loop, when does it start? So, let's take another look, and this is the most accepted fact in the community right now. Canon's prophecy. Now look, I understand that Columbina is a god, and using mortal logic on her is kinda overshooting our expectations here. So, the best explanation right now is that it's because of Canon's prophecy, where she told the people of the Frostmoon Scions that a new moon goddess will be reborn in her stead, and that prophecy indeed came true in Outcry 500 years before the current events. By lore, that should be the case, especially that Columbina is also the Frostmoon and is reincarnated from it. Canon used the remaining of her power to create Columbina in the future, where she can be reborn as the new moon goddess. We also learn in the Luna Triarchon quest that the moon goddess's longing wish to protect Teyvat is likely the reason why Columbina was created 6,000 years later, which makes sense because the sisters immediately realized Columbina to be their sibling. So that on its own is the best explanation, but at the same time, you guys have to remember that even the three moon goddesses were bewildered when they met Columbina for the first time. While they realized Columbina is their sister, what they didn't expect is that she also got imprisoned. Besides, Kuvaki did not exist in Teyvat prior to them entering the prison, but it did exist the moment the moon goddesses returned to Teyvat because Columbina already turned her body into moonlight, or known as Kuvaki. So, Canon made that prophecy to the Frostmoon Scions while she had knowledge that Columbina will be born anyway because the proof is in Outcry itself, where Columbina's body is already all across Outcry. So now you see the problem, right? Yes, Canon created the prophecy and Columbina was born around the Cataclysm. The Cataclysm in itself likely played a part because the False Sky weakened. Therefore, Columbina's Trilone authority leaked into Teyvat. Whatever the case might be, these two explained how Columbina was born, but it never really answers why she was born in the middle of it. There's a time paradox where Columbina's birth was told to the moon goddesses, and the only goddess that has her moon intact, Canon, made the prophecy that Columbina will be born and she herself knows how it all will happen. This created many questions. Was Canon's prophecy came from her power or was it from her knowledge? How it all began if Canon only knew that Columbina is a moon goddess from the future and created a prophecy based on the person she met. This meant that there's a third party that interfered with Columbina's birth. Or if I can put it in another way, someone actually made Columbina born and implanted so complexly that it happened naturally. Believe it or not, Natlan's lore, more specifically the very first song of Welcome Moon Archon Quest and in a Vicinity Weapon, plays a role here. Even though Not Cry started at Luna 1, the Song of Welkin Moon officially starts at 5.8, which in this case, that patch is still very relevant because the dragons were the origin of the moons from the very beginning. So to put it simply, Innafa's signature weapon states that the Sovereign rulers and Kukulkan were trying to imitate Nibelung's moon forging, meaning they were intended to make the fourth moon in the sky. However, Xiuhquatl responded to Nibelung's return and stopped the Natlanese dragons in creating the fourth moon. This information is from the 11th ruler of Xiuhquatl's AI dragons that is now known as Innafa, and I know is the second person who canonically knows about this information. We learn in the Archon quest that the original 3 moons did ascend from Notcry specifically, and it fits Natlan's lore as well, where it implies that the moons were created somewhere near Chichen Uchtoka, or now known as Otkanatlan. We also learn in the web events that Notcry are fragments of the moon that failed to ascend, which we also learn in Nocturne Curtain's call that Notcry is indeed the fragments that never become a moon. So, if we combine this together, then Columbina's birth was originally intended, it's just that she was never complete, hence why she was never born from the very beginning. So, if we put this in logic, if Canon's Frost Moon indeed uses her own powers and Notcry in itself, fused with Columbina's Guvaki from the prison, this might explain why Columbina is born. But even then, this still doesn't answer why she was suddenly born during the Cataclysm, because I find the timing is very interesting. We joked a lot that the Heavenly Principles and the Shades should intervene, but they didn't. Mind you, what the turret did is extremely dangerous. At the end of the quest, the turret's action was so fatal that Teyvat is now more visible throughout the universe. But this in its own is bad because the false sky was made to hide Teyvat from the outside. So, imagine this. This is very heavy, borderline fanfiction theory by the way, so don't take it too literally. What if Columbina's birth is the Shade's way of intervening? Let me explain. In the Hymns of the Far North, we learn that Istaroth played a role in protecting the imprisoned 4 moons. At first, we thought the 4 imprisoned moons probably related from beyond the false sky. But turns out, this statement is quite literal. We further learn that this imprisonment does happen in the Archon quest, where Arya, Sonat, Canon, and Columbina are in one singular lunar palace in Nibelung's time and space prison. So, when the book says 4 imprisoned moons, it's likely referring to this scene specifically. This lunar palace seems to be Canon's because if you observe the Frost Moon's terrain carefully, there are a lot of hoops that look similar like the ones in Nibelung's prison. Not only that, there is no lunar palace in that moon at all, which is contradictory to what we know about the moons because in the lore so far, we learned that each moon has its own lunar palace. It might be the reason why the Heavenly Principles did not destroy the Frost Moon's palace immediately, but rather threw it away outside of the false sky. Maybe they knew that a moon goddess will be reborn from there, or maybe because they knew that the palace can't be destroyed, hence why they thrown it outside so Canon eventually wither away. Who knows? But what's relevant is that Canon's lunar palace is likely inside Nibelung's prison. Since this lunar palace is still in there, it's likely the main reason why the moon goddesses still remain intact, because it is their closest link to a moon. But what does this have to do with the Shades? Now this is where it gets interesting. Are you ready? In Polka Beneath the Moon's Oracle World Quest, we learn that Ayla, the first Moonchanter of the Frost Moon Scions, witnessed Columbina's birth. However, before all that happened, she murdered Lovia, who was the High Archpriestess at that time. To put it simply, Lovia is evil and will do anything to bring Frost Moon Scions to the golden age of Hyperborea once again, and even work together with Rotwang, who is the main antagonist of Iglua's World Quest series. The one who guided Ayla to commit the murder, believe it or not, is a Shade. Ronova. Of course, the quest did not explicitly say that Ronova guided her, but she was referred to as the Lady of the Underworld, Tuonetar. So, of course, you might ask, why does Ronova even go so far as to ask a human to murder another human? There has to be a reason, right? Well, get this! Lovia's way of wanting to restore Hyperborea's golden age is by completing the Sacred Heir project, which by the way, find the Sacred Heir to give birth to the new moon goddess, but in this case, this never happens because the Sacred Heir, in this case Reed Miller's mother, ran away from the Frost Moon Scions. Her husband was eventually slain by Rotwang at the Lovia's prequest, and Reed Miller's mother committed suicide in sorrow. The funny thing is while the Sacred Heir project failed and Lovia was murdered, the birth was instead in the Sanctum of the Oathbearer, where Columbina was born under the Verdant Crest tree without anyone giving birth to her. So don't you find Renova's way of interfering to be interesting? Not only that, the Verdant Crest was already stated in the Hymns of the Far North, which if you don't remember, was dated all the way from Hyperborean era. The only problem is that the Verdant Crest should never appear in that book because it shouldn't have existed. This means that the Verdant Crest did exist in Hyperborea but was moved into the future. And who could have done that? Istaroth, because the Verdant Crest is stated in her chapter. This now comes to Columbina's birth, and if it is indeed using primordial water, then the one who could have done that is none other than Nabirius, or in this case, likely Rhindaughter. However, there might be more than just using primordial water, because if you don't remember, the Sacred Air is a woman, and in Columbina's first character story, she was born under amniotic water, likely referring to the water in the sanctum of the Oathbearer, or it could even be Reed Miller's mother's amniotic water. Whatever the case might be, the water is very likely Rhindaughter or Nabirius' power, as the ruler of life holds authority over Tevat's life forms. The funny thing about all this is that the premise of the God's Limits trailer was to show that the Shades are going to play a part in intervening with the Fatui's plans. However, it so happens to also show Columbina at the end of the trailer glitching. We didn't really think too much of it at first, but if you notice Renova's final frame, she was using her power, likely the moment when she finally starts to intervene. Remember, the Shades were not allowed to directly intervene with humanity's fate, and we see that being the case with Renova as she got punished to even create the Night Kingdom with Yohual the Juthin. This is further mentioned in Nocturne's curtain call as well. So, when Renova said,
"Of course, to the extent permitted by the rules,"
it's likely to be a very complex procedure as long as they don't directly intervene with humanity as per the rules created by the heavenly principles. Renova guided Ayla to murder Lovia, while Istaroth with Nabirius or Rhindaughter managed to move the Verdant Crest from the past Hyperborea into 6,000 years later and created Columbina. We talked about the dragons earlier, and Istaroth likely moved some parts of what could make Columbina born into the time when the Cataclysm came. While the prison is also a different time and space, Columbina's nature weapon states that Istaroth can't reach this place either, so she likely used something else to accelerate Columbina's birth. But either way, this matches every single part of their lines in the hymns of the far north. Nabirius with creating life using primordial ocean, in this case referring to the water inside the sanctum of the Oathbearer, Renova who abhorred the arrogant and disrespectful, in this case Lovia, and Istaroth with the imprisoned four moons, as implied in the Archon quest, where we witness four moon goddesses inside a prison. It's quite funny when you think about it, because this world quest is one of the most intertwined quests with the Archon quest, where it basically tells the traveler how Columbina was born. Renova was involved in this, but it's quite strange when you think about it, because what's the reason for Renova to intervene in this human affair? Unless the power of the moon goddesses is relevant to their plan, I also find this theory to be a bit unlikely, because the moons are now seen as a threat by the heavenly principles. It's the reason why they have to destroy two of the moons and flung the frost moon outside of Tevat. In short, what the Shades did can be seen as a threat by the heavenly principles, but whether this can be seen as a good thing or not, who knows? All I'm saying is that the Shades not intervening with the Torah's actions is strange, and there has to be a main reason why they did not intervene. Unless Columbina is their intervention from the very beginning, Columbina's bootstrap paradox remains to be explained. I'm tired. My brain is so dead right now, and I just want to move on to my other theories about what we can expect in the future patches. However, one thing for sure about this video is that Notcry is not yet over. Hymns of the Far North is not yet explained, and whatever happens in the Luna Force Archon quest means there are still more unanswered questions that needed to be solved. Like for example, Columbina's notorious birth logic, the glitch at the end of the quest, Nahida's involvement in future patches, whether the Torah is alive or not, and finally, I realized how much I hate time traveling storyline. Because oh my god, this is so confusing. If every single one of my points were indeed relevant, then coming back to Mondstadt, Sumeru, and Natlan makes a lot of sense now, because they will still talk about the moons regardless. The next expansion is likely going to be Mondstadt, and if you finish Lakeham's Fardnir's World Quest, we learn that the angel in the Drunkard's Tale and Etherlight's Spintelute is Koitak herself, and she is the one who gave Boreas his power. We even learned that Boreas and his kin came from Notcry, which makes sense sense for them to be the children of the moon as they originated from that land. Sumeri will likely learn more about the Torre, while Natlan will be about Marejivari. Just to be transparent with you all, I know I will be proven wrong with this theory, but at the same time, this paradox made my brain tickle a bit, and frankly, I have never been this critical on one video. Deadass, the moment I thought I reached, aha! It suddenly shifted to, but if the moon goddesses were imprisoned before the moons were destroyed, then what's the point of them having to plan on making a new moon goddesses anyway? They don't even know what happened in the future, so their plan was because they saw Columbina, and if that's the case, then what? Besides, as much as I hate time traveling plots, one thing for certain is that I still enjoy making this video, and if it's not true, then it's fine. I always expect my theories to be not true anyway because it's not canon lore, but when it's proven to be true, that's where the joy starts to overflow. In any case, I'll talk about the rest of my theories in another video, so be sure to wait for that and I'll see you on the next one. Tana!